So let's say Latifa is going to bring her best friend Sophia in. Yes, always best friends. Always good to camp with, right? Best practice for getting started in a new community.
I thought that was going to. I don't know why that sort of came to my mind as well. What would be a good place to start when it comes to building community?
Yes.
Hi, Latifa.
Thanks for turning on your camera. Amazing to see you.
Okay.
And we have Jay. Thanks, Jay. Amazing to see you as well. Welcome to the fireside. So, best practices for getting started in a new community. So, I suppose you mean with that, like launching a new community, right? That's what we would call greenfield, basically. If you've never done this before, yeah. So, big yes. So, I think maybe to like go back a little bit in time when I did onboarding at Inside It. What I usually say is momentum is important. So you need to have all the stars aligned, maybe to go to the camping theme. 3 factors that I find personally very important, essentially content, traffic, and activation. So what does it mean? Content, of course, you need to have a community. You need something to discover for people, right? I compare it sometimes with an empty restaurant. To really have a good start with a community, you really want to have something for people to read and enjoy, right? So basically you want to have some initial content on the community. On our community, we have categories and groups. So each group of categories should also have at least 3, maybe 4, the more the merrier, content pieces for people to discover and enjoy. And I think that already will help you, because then people will already feel that there is something happening and that they can easily respond to, or like they feel more motivated to start a topic by themselves. So that's the content bit. But of course, content is nice and neat, but if nobody can find it, then you have little. So traffic, the second part, I think is almost the most important pillar of all of those, to be honest. If you don't have your traffic strategy right, I personally would recommend you to postpone even a go live for later. What does it mean? Well, first of all, you want to have like links on your homepage, ideally also in your products, maybe in like the outgoing emails from support. Like think about like where do people have questions and where could a link to the community could be valuable. And it depends also a little bit also on the use cases, of course. But also for that, you have some promotion bits and campaigns, right? So you want to maybe tie that to a customer event. So what I always love to see is when customers launch their community at a customer event, so like with a big red button that they're going to push or something along those lines, that usually can help as well. But for me, why is traffic so important? In the beginning, I think it's also a numbers game. To just give you some ballpark figures, for B2C, for example, I know very well that from 100 visitors, only 1 will register, and only from that, only 50% will become active. So to have an active community, you will need to have some numbers that also basically bring the users to your community, so you get this initial activation. So that's why I find it so crucial, because if you don't have that traffic and not enough people are becoming active, you will have this like half active community for a longer period. And if the users are not active, you have to be active, because again, recency of content and activity. If I come to your community and I see the last activity has been like a week ago or something, then I probably will not become active myself. So that's why I find this momentum really important. And the third one would be then activation. Really engage with your members so they come back, and we'll also feel that they can talk to somebody who's from the company. But it's more than that. Essentially also gamification, notifications, email newsletters, all of these things, where you basically also then promote and stimulate also activity from the users. It can also be a content piece, like an introduce yourself topic or some polls or what have you. So usually there, like I also find this an important step, of course, that once the people are on the community, that they become activated by call to actions, content, promotional pieces, so that then they also come back and become active themselves. And then these people start creating content, which then hopefully at one point will also attract new members, for example, via Google. So I think like these things are like the essence of launching a community. And if I were you, I would probably try to start with the biggest bang possible and try to get as many people online at the same time. There are some communities who are also soft launching. It's not wrong by all means, but try to make this a set period that not goes longer than maybe like 2 months or 3 month max, because otherwise you're in this limbo where there's some activity, but you don't have this critical mass, because usually you don't have like 1,000 users in a soft launch, right? So think about these things as well. Some communities also use a soft launch period to fill up the community with content. So they have an advocacy group or some super users that they have from somewhere who are motivated to also to create content for you, and then they fill up the community for you. But I think in general, content, traffic, activation are the three most big, important things to look at when you're starting with your community. I hope that helped you with your question.
I was just going to chip in on that. I guess set expectations as well, right? Have the right expectations about what your community is going to achieve. Don't try and reinvent the wheel and think that everything's going to jump off and go at 100 miles an hour straight away, because it most likely won't. So whoever you're reporting to, whoever's obviously invested in this community, make sure altogether, with respect to the use cases, you have the expectations set. Depending on the use case, you might want to start with a slightly smaller launch, get super users, get buy-in by certain active people, right? People who are going to champion you, people who are going to champion the cause internally, who will be active on your behalf. It's not easy for one person to cover 24 hours in a day. So find those champions, internal, external, who are really going to help give that activation and traffic. And that will also help continue to drive and push the wheel as you go forward. So expectations is also an important thing to manage with whoever you're selling it to internally.
Yeah. I think. Yeah. Yes. Next question here right now from Eli or Ellie. You mentioned the B2C conversion benchmarks. Do you have conversion benchmarks for B2B? Very good topic, because that's what we're working on right now. And you will hopefully be finding that like in a couple of weeks or so on the Inspired community. I can at least give you a glimpse because we have so many B2B communities starting with us like in the last year or two. So we have some data there. I usually see there like some differences with like a B2C community. In B2C, you usually have a slower start and then it just like levels in at one point, and you will have an increase there because you have more people coming in via Google and such, finding that content. But with B2B, usually it's more or less the other way around almost. I usually see there like a big first spike in the activation, because usually you promote then the community to all of your customer base, and then many of them will also sign up because they find it valuable, and then that naturally will drop. So in the beginning, I think in the first 2 or 3 months, I often see conversion rates above 5% even. I think like top performing communities would be even around 10-11% even, because I think also the average visitor has different purpose of coming to the community, right? In B2C, people, they come to consume and then they just go on with their life because they found the information, ideally. In B2B, most of the times, if they're working with your product and they're working professionally with your product, then they also have other incentives to become active and to engage with other users. So there naturally the conversion is a little bit higher. But after these 2 or 3 months, usually that will dip a little bit, and then you will sit. And that's like my gut feeling from numbers that I saw recently, but I think you're like somewhere then between 2 and 3% in average. But that depends also a little bit. I have B2B customers that have 100,000 customers, but I have also B2B customers that only have, 50 different companies as a customer. So that factor always plays a role in there as well, I feel. But normally they would level in there like with a couple of hundred registrations per month then over that, and then they basically are flat with the registrations, but that's normal because a lot of their customers have already onboarded. Yes, so I think that's hopefully helping you with that. So let's see. Inside B2B, are you aware of best practices for co-design communities where members join to help you develop a product they can use in the future? Wow, that's amazing. I don't see that happening too often, to be honest. Like, yes, we do a lot of, like, our customers are doing a lot of co-creation, but that's really then more for like marketing content or support content or what have you, and not necessarily a full-fledged product. But I love that idea. So what we do, what many of our customers are doing is usually that they run beta groups on the community, for example, where a specific group has access to a specific hidden category on the community where they're brainstorming and giving feedback. We do that. We do also have beta communities, which are just about new products and improving them. And that's, I think, coming a little bit closer to that. And what you can do there is as well, for example, we have an ideation module where people can submit ideas or feedback, and then other people can vote on that, and others can assign a status, for example. So you can have like some workflows going where people can basically help you to build the product. And I think on the community is also the right space to have that. Essentially, what I saw in my community back in the days, our beta super users, so the very active and enthusiastic users, they were also in our beta program. And that knowledge that they acquired about new upcoming products and features, they could use that already and apply the first day that the new product or feature will hit the market. So I think it's very good and to have that on the community also from that perspective. Best practices there again would be like to make use of that ideation module that we offer. You can limit that to certain groups so that only they have special access to this. And then also with the community, you can either overtly or passively ask for customers to sign up for such a program. So you can make a group out of that and people can have a request for that group, and then you can maybe check their profile, see if they tick all the boxes, and then let them in. So these kind of things, I think they work really well. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Alistair, if you know anything from your experience.
No, I mean, I think you pretty covered it pretty well. The idea is garnering ideas rather than co-creating a product, right? I think it's more a physical co-creation makerspace type thing rather than an online community, which is a bit tougher. It would be great. I mean, I've certainly seen developer communities sprout up, right? People are working together in the development world, trying to co-create in that sense, but it's not necessarily something I've seen publicized very often.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Maybe that's like a given, but like I just want to say, of course, you want to have the buy-in of the product team, right? You want to make sure that also on the other side of the table internally, people are able to work with all that feedback, because sometimes that can be overwhelming. So if I were you and you're in the middle as a community manager, I would always say, okay, make sure that the scope is well defined together with the product team, so that also in the communication to the users who you're onboarding to that program also know exactly what can be done, what cannot be done, because I think sometimes that could bring problems with the expectations of users, because I've also seen that going very wrong, where like basically people had the best ideas in the world and then nothing happens with it, and that's detrimental to the success of your community, of course. So, Jay, question from you. We did a soft launch and slowly added products to the mix in our B2B community. Any recommendations to inject some energy into the community and get more people participating? Okay, that's a very interesting one. So, soft launch, you added products, okay. But you are now out of that soft launch phase, or are you already in that? Still in that?
Yeah, it was just as we gathered volunteers. Some willingly and some less willingly to get involved, and added more products to get more traction. It kind of, in hindsight, might have been better to have more products to begin with, but that's the way we chose to go. And now we've got this thing where we've added and we've grown, but it just seems like it's not the B2B example you gave where it's high and then it kind of drops off. It's just slowly grinding slowly upwards.
Yeah,
very slowly.
May I ask you, so is your community a private community, or like if I would go to your platform right now to that URL, like would I see content, would I see anything, or is it just a login wall? Because I think that's often where it like goes wrong.
Yeah, no, it is publicly viewable, but to participate you have to have a login, you have to be a customer.
Good, because that would have been like the first thing I wanted to touch on. If you have a soft launch and everything is behind a login wall, people usually don't see the value after it, right? Like, so like that's like something that I would fix if I were you in the first place then. But if that's not really the problem, I think there are multiple things you can do. First of all, content strategy. So maybe build a content calendar for yourself. Again, as I said, users are not active, you should be active yourself. I think that also ties in a little bit into what you were saying with bringing in more products. I want to say something about that as well. It's always how many users do you have and how much categories do you have, right? Because if you have only like, let's say 50 users, but you have 50 categories, that's already like they're not adding up. And I think that's maybe also part of that challenge that you have right now. So if I were you, probably I would connect content strategy together with a promotional strategy that you say like, look, we work on a lot of content in the next few weeks or so, not just to test the waters a little bit. I usually say like content strategy is sometimes a bit fishing in the waters, like, okay, see like what's working, what's resonating with users, what are they responding to? And then tie that also to like some promotional campaign. For example, one thing that I'm super excited about right now, we're building an email campaign feature where you can email all of the community users And if you would then make like a campaign and say like, after you executed some of the content pieces and there is some good recent content in all of the categories, then make a campaign to the existing user base, say like, hey, we overhauled the community, we're ready for launch, we're going to do this now, blah, blah, blah. Opening it up to them, give them another trigger to visit the community, maybe put some content pieces in there as well to stimulate that. And then ideally also open up as much as possible to a wider audience, because again, there you will then see that also other parts will come to the community, other users that you have not maybe invited before. And then hopefully then also then the engagement will pick up from there. But I think also one last tip I want to give you, try to follow there also, maybe related to the content strategy, try to follow the interest of your users. So what people are looking at, what people are responding to, and even if they're not replying, what are people looking at, I think also can tell you a little bit like which area or which themes customers are interested in, and then try to do that. And I think like with that, you should already be good, but there might be also some more like where you promote customers, or where you have many people also start their community with like some contests or something like this where they can win something, right? So like these could also be cool things like, hey, share your success story with our product and win an Amazon voucher or something along those lines. Mm-hmm. So this is what I would be doing there. I hope that helped.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Cool. So Ed, we're an ISV. I assume that's internet service provider. I'm not that good in the B2B space. Should ideation for community be separate from product dev feedback? Good question.
No, that means we're a software developer.
Okay. I think it can go hand in hand. So like I personally would always try to put as much content as possible, product feedback into ideation, because there you have these structured flows. You can also have some further integration with other tools. Like we have a product board integration, for example. And if it's happening in the rest of the community, then it sometimes might not be taken within the product board feedback, right? So I think if I were you, I would try to funnel everything into ideation. And that's not just in the community, but also outside of the community. So I tell our support agents, hey, point people to the ideation category, or my fellow CSMs, of course, in our company, I don't have to tell that, but previously you could tell all the people, hey, funnel all that feedback into ideation so that everything is in one central space. But I think in general, they don't have to be, they can be separated. So if your question is if it should be another tool other than the community tool, yes, that can work. Ideally, also there you have everything on one platform. I see that working very well on our community, where we can just convert a question, maybe like, hey, how can I do this? And the feature is unsupported, that you can then convert that into an idea so that it's already directly on the same platform, the same with the same users. So we see that working a little bit better from an engagement perspective than having that in separate spaces and siloed. Does that answer your question a little bit, or any follow-up questions? Anything else I can help you with there?
No, that answers it just fine. We're just trying to make our product development team understand that this entire community is not solely just for their benefit. We have a third party tool that's being used today, and my thinking is we implement ideation on our own community platform, but also have a link to product feedback directly to their third-party system, as you mentioned.
Yeah, it depends a little bit, of course, like what tool you're using there, or what nature of that feedback is, right? Like if it's like more, let's say you have a qualitative tool that you're using next to that for like scheduling an interview with like a product manager or something like this, that could work very well next to the community. But I think you want to minimize the chance of duplicate ideas on both platforms as much as possible, right? Because otherwise you have this very segmented view of the product feedback, and people might lose on opportunities. It will be more effort for a customer to find the idea or to figure out, hey, has that idea already been shared? What's the status? So from a customer effort point of view, but also from a process point of view for the team working with that feedback, ideally you have everything under one hood.
Thank you.
Great.
I would say, let me just chip in, I guess. There's also the separation between feedback on ideas that are sort of being proposed, which is one thing, which is what the ideation module is really good for, because you can then comment and chat and converse and back and forth. And then there's feedback maybe on roadmaps and things that your product team are sharing with the community. And so that's something we do a lot. We have a quarterly roadmap update from our head of product. He gives out a quarterly product roadmap update that comes out as a post. We're going to start making that more of a formal feedback loop where people can have a call like this, where then we can talk about the roadmap rather than just leave it as a thread. So Jay, going back to sort of the engagement thing is, we're trying to find ways to converse rather than just have a static piece of content, right? It's all very well posting out a piece of content and people saying, yay, great, the roadmap looks good. But really, what's your thoughts? What could we do better? What could be advanced? What are we doing wrong? And that comes more candidly via talking rather than just, chat and forum type messages. So even being a bit more transparent and open and discussing it in a forum is another way to garner feedback, maybe on a slightly different angle, which is worth doing. And evokes community, right? It brings us all together to talk about something that we're all passionate about. So just another idea as well.
Yeah, I like that a lot. By the way, also, that's maybe tying it to just something I wanted to speak about that I thought would be interesting for you to understand in general. So our ideation is actually hidden. So if you come to our community, you cannot see our ideation category. You cannot participate in it. We deliberately have chosen for only accepting and working with feedback from existing customers. People do that differently, but maybe that's a good segue also to a different topic that I find quite interesting is customers versus non-customers. And that might be something new for like some people here in the audience, but I do have some communities that I'm working with who are very active in product feedback and at the same time also in lead generation via the community. And I think that's a very powerful pair actually, because how they do it is essentially they motivate people to share their product feedback on the community, and a lot of people are doing that. Then they're onboarded on the community, and then via that, they also start engaging with other parts of the community itself. So they start like sharing their stories, asking questions, which then, if your community has reached a certain level of maturity, will also attract people who are not even customers of yours. So I'm convinced that the community, if it's really mature, can have really big added value for all stages of the customer lifecycle, so even pre-purchase. And I think that for these reasons also, you should be actually ideally opening up your community for non-customers. So we have a setup, for example, that if you register, we don't have an SSO. With an SSO, it's easier. But where we identify via some automation in the background, are you a customer or not? So we can, for example, check your Salesforce record. And then you get automated access to these areas. But I think for non-logged in customers, again, it's super important also to be able to see the community because they read what other customers are thinking. They have access to the roadmap updates, all of the other cool things. They can ask questions about platform functionality, how to go about certain challenges that you see in your strategy. And from this point of view, I think it's like so valuable also for these non-customers to have access to your community. So if I were you, also try to look at, doesn't have to be in the very first phase, but like in a phase 2 or phase 3, that you then open up the community to this wider audience to make sure that even non-customers can participate. And the communities that I spoke about just now, they're even tracking that and ideally also feeding that into their HubSpot or whatever they have to then also to reach out to these people who engaged with your company and the company content via the community. So don't miss out on this very cool opportunity also there.
I guess following on from that, another thing I've seen people do is limit what content you can see based on what products you own. Yeah. So if you're a multi-product vendor and your customers contain one product and you only show them one product, you're missing a whole cross-sell opportunity. You're missing the opportunity to let them get inspired by other products. And so very often I've worked with other people in communities, knowledge bases, to say don't limit yourself, right? Okay, give them a preference, let them prioritize what they bought, but don't stop them from seeing other material because you don't want to miss that opportunity as well to get that cross sell from an internal that greedy side. We want you to see the other great things we do. So certainly don't limit what people can see, I think.
Actually, a very important point, and this is something I once even made a whole presentation about, private community versus public community. Look, the thing is, for me, I see that more often happening in B2B than in B2C, that people want to protect the conversations of their customers. And, often there's good reasons for it. And that also can be happening on a public community than in a hidden area. But I personally would always try to, from a community management perspective, to have the community as open as possible. Just like what I said to you, Jay, if you have this login wall that people bump their head against, we see this a day and night difference between these communities. Public communities are so much more successful. yes, you can. I would always recommend you to have like at least like somewhat of a hybrid approach to it. A recent example that I have of this is the Cognite community. Maybe I can share the link in the chat later. They had like their community almost like completely closed because the developers, they set themselves like, hey, we want to make sure that we are only speaking to each other and nobody can read that. But they are slowly but steadily opening even more. But when I started with them, how I approached that was basically say like, hey, let's have the community open, have a homepage that people can enjoy, have some content pieces that everybody can see when they're not logged in, so that at least they can see some of the value. And even if it's just like how to register on the community or like some very super generic FAQs or like a topic like, hey, what is this community for? You already achieved so much more than this like private state where you have this login wall, because people will feel the value of it. They maybe can see some statistics on the community. So always try to open it as much as possible, because this really can make or break the success of your community. So this is like, I think like something super, super important. I always try to underline in my conversations with customers if they have some worries about, and this is also something we do on our community, and to a certain degree, for example, on our community for community managers, our discussions about moderation, they are in a private section, because we don't want them to have public discussions about like, I don't know, problematic users or how to go about spam or some things, right? We don't want to have that in the public. So there are good reasons for some hidden areas, but usually you should be able to at least have something in public, and even if it's just the most generic onboarding content. So this is a little bit what I want to say about that. I don't know if we have any new questions. Otherwise,
I haven't seen anything coming in.
Right, example.
Can I build on that one real quick, Julian?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So I get the whole don't put a wall up, but like you were talking about people that might come in and spam on it. What about, just letting anyone come and post versus the only people that can post are paying customers? We've taken the latter route, but I'm almost wondering if we should have taken down any barriers and kept it as frictionless as possible.
Yeah, it's always a bit tricky, right? Like I think I get your point. You're concerned about like spammers, for example. I think if you have just a very simple email password registration flow, then you may be like opening the doors for spammers. I usually try to not limit my users' activation by worries about these kind of things unless they're actually taking place. And I've seen spam like pages worth of it, right? Like people are super smart and like going around like certain like checks and balances that we might have. So ideally you have an SSO, and that SSO is happening on your company side, and then you have there also a non-customer SSO. So I've seen flavors of that as well, where people then have even a customer login and a non-customer login. You could do it also with a social media login. So for example, log in with your LinkedIn, because it's harder to fake profiles on LinkedIn than, for example, on Google. So these were usually like the best things that work against spam and abuse. But if I were you and you have not seen that so far, I probably would just test the waters a little bit and then see, okay, do we get any spammers? Is there anything going wrong? Because most of the times you should be okay. There might be an occasional spam post in between, but if I get 10 active users or non-customers asking questions for one spammer, then I'm happy to take that, because again, like if they're not spamming like pages worth of content on your community, then usually like it's also fine. You can deal with that relatively quick. But on top of that, depends of course always on the vendor that you're using. We do have like some like Akismet spam check on posts. So before it's published, we check that. We have keyword blockers, all of these things. We can also blacklist certain email domains, right? So you could think about like, okay, should we maybe block like a Gmail or something else? But if I were you, probably, and that's also like with negativity, like I see often concerns before a go live, like, oh, will there not be too much negativity in our community in public? It goes almost like hand in hand. I get these worries, but most of the times it actually is quite okay how it then like turns out to be on the community. Yeah.
And it's also worth managing the negativity on your own community, because if you don't let them do it, they'll do it somewhere. So you may as well do it in your own house and have a way to respond or control in some ways. The other thing I'd say about logins, because I've done it, is joining communities with personal login allows me to take it no matter which job I'm at. So, for example, following Salesforce certifications and following Salesforce Trailblazer things, I did it on my personal email because I didn't expect to stay in that job forever. And so I can at least carry my stuff forward with me. So even non-account-based logins would be used. And I was going to say something else, but I've gone out of my head right now. But that's it. So we have in our community, we have an automation whereby when they register, their email is checked against Salesforce, and if it matches up with an account email in Salesforce, then they get given a certain role as a customer. So we know that login is a customer. So some automation gives us that ability to recognize a customer versus not, which then can give you personalization methods and everything else down the line. Just throwing that one out there.
Yeah, I just shared like a link of this like hybrid experience that I spoke about. They used to be much more closed than what you see right now. So now you can actually even see like some recent posts. Like back then, they only just showed like 3 different topics. Do this or do that. Here's how to log in. But you could see also this like call to action banner at the top that says like, hey, you're not logged in, unlock all the conversations, sign in. So it's always this balance. But I second you there, what you said earlier, Alistair, like I would never like limit content too much from being enjoyed by other customers without being logged in, because essentially it's an effort question, right? You want to make content easy access. Our community came from being private and being health closed. And for example, if I'm launching a new community with a customer and they have a developer, they just want to check out like something about the API, and I send them a link, and then they first have to go through this whole registration process. I find that's a bit like too much to ask. So try to find this balance here also, like how much can we go with this? Recently, I've been playing also with customers that via script, this like with like news articles or something, right? Like you can read like the first snippet of an article and then you have to sign in. So also there might be some like custom scripting opportunities for you to at least put them on some areas where we really feel like, okay, this is really like valuable and we want people to sign in if they're looking at this specifically. But I would, again, like not do that for the whole community, because it would feel like undermining the activation capability or potential of your community. Good. Any other questions? Otherwise, I can also check, because I think I had 1 or 2 things prepared.
How many are we left? Let's see. Nothing new in the chat. Launch SV, I think we've covered them.
Yeah.
Public, Elizabeth is gone. So, what else can you have to share with our campers?
Okay. So I think one that I like to speak about always is our communities usually have 2 or 3 different use cases. First of all, self-service and support deflection, right? So question answer, ideally also other users answering question. The second would be engagement and advocacy, and the third one would be ideation, product feedback. So if we talk about the first one, where many of our customers are starting with, is the service value of the community and how to measure that. And I think like there are a lot of things like I could speak about right now where traditionally come from in B2C. We used to have exit service in our community, and they can be quite valuable. So we would have service in our community that would just ask a number of visitors, did you come to the community with a question? Did you find the answer to that question? And would you have contacted support otherwise? With these 3 metrics, you can then basically calculate then a deflection value of your community. So if you have like 100,000 visitors a month and you have, let's say, 30% deflection of support service questions, then roughly some 30,000 users would have contacted support otherwise. If you then multiply that by the average cost of handling a support request to your team, then you can even, and then deduct the platform cost, of course, can even make a return of investment calculation quite easily from that. So this is traditionally where we're coming from, what many B2C communities are still doing, like T-Mobile or others, like they would run these surveys on their community to gather these insights. But we have recently shifted to a different approach to that, which I think also with B2B is quite interesting. And I don't know, Alistair, if you want to talk about this or if I want to explain it, either way is fine with me.
You explain it because you've seen it more from the inside side. And if I need to chip in from the service side, I will do.
It's actually super simple. We just look at how many unique visitors have visited your community and how many unique users or customers have created a ticket to your support team. We do have on our platform, and I'm actually like, I can show that. Hey, I have it even open. Great. Cool. If you want, I could show that to you real quick. So yeah, let's let's just do the entire screen, whatever. So you can see here, this is the self-service dashboard from our community, from our Inspired community. And right now you can see here the period of like the last month. And what we're measuring, this is using a Zendesk integration. So we measure on our Zendesk site how many unique visitors are creating tickets and how many have actually visited our community and viewed help content. And we can also basically further filter that down on, like, for example, category that the content sits in, or the content type. For example, I'm only interested in questions that have been marked as answered, or only support articles and not the average discussion, or even like go into certain user roles or different companies, however I like it. And then we calculate the self-service score. It's a very simple ratio, essentially, right? So it's, let me see again. So the unique users that viewed the content versus users that created a ticket. And you can see here, 25 is basically telling us for every user that created a ticket in our support area, we have 25 people looking at content on the community. And if we now go a little bit further than that, well, it's actually going for 1 year already. I did not know that. Okay, good. Well, that's for a longer period. But then you can see that even like how this is developing month by month. And I've seen quite some interesting data. I mean, happily to say we don't have that many outages ourselves. But if you talk about like the average telco, like a T-Mobile, as I mentioned before, let's say if they have a big network outage, they channel community traffic to the community, support traffic to the community to dedicated FAQs about these outages. And you can see then they are also very, it's very impressive actually to see how this then spikes like crazy in these months, on these days, simply because the community will then catch the fall kind of that otherwise would have flooded your support team. I always say, like, if the company is not really working well, the community usually is thriving. And these outage scenarios are gold for these moments. And with this simple calculation, everybody can do that. You just need to ask your head of support, hey, what's the total of unique people that created tickets? And then you can also look at that. What the difference here is, what maybe other platform vendors are looking at providing, or the average Google Analytics, for example. We look really at the content level and not at the homepage level. So if you don't have this kind of insight, I would recommend you go into the behavior and Google Analytics, for example, in the behavior segment, and then check there how many people are not looking at the homepage, but actually at the content pages. Because of course, that's strong case. 90% could be going to the homepage and then leaving again. Super interesting data. By the way, also for you, Jay, if you want to analyze like activation and where people are dropping off, on which pages do people leave the community. And if you have a lot of people leaving the homepage, I would add more call to actions there, for example. But I'm drifting off. This is a super easy calculation everybody can do. And as I said before, like usually when stuff is not working out well for the company, then it's working out well for the community. To maybe, if we don't have any other questions, I can give you like an anecdote. My community, when I was starting back then, was with a GPS device provider. My community was live for like 2 or 3 weeks when they had the technical issue where basically all the GPS devices around the world stopped working, and they were just bricked, essentially. Nobody knew what was going on. And nobody was able to help. The support team was flooded. The retailers were going crazy. Everybody was just, not knowing what's going on. The community was really shining in that moment. And even though my community was very young, I was able to deflect thousands upon thousands of support calls and support tickets just based off of that. And it also helped me to create super users, because in that moment where nobody really knew what was going on and we were not even fast enough to respond to, like, I don't know, a 20 or 30 page thread on the community, these users, key users, would step in and share that information with other users asking questions. So also in these pivotal moments, usually then super users emerge, and these users stick around for like years after that, helped me a lot, and they provided so much value for us and for customers. So if I can give you one tip today that really can change the game for your community, try to align with other parts of the business to rely on the community when nothing else is working. And with nothing else, I really mean nothing else. Like I had, I'm not going to say the name, but there was one telco in the Netherlands that last year had their whole infrastructure down, like their website was not working, nothing was working. only the community. And I think in these situations, of course, it's a super strong case, but especially in these situations, make sure that other people know that you can rely on the community for one-to-many communication, just to funnel everybody in that one direction, in that one space, and your users will thank you, and also the rest of the business. Yeah. And that's a little bit what I wanted to share today with you. I don't know if you had anything else on your list, Alistair. We want to call it a day. Any other questions, comments, worries?
Let's open it up one more time. See if I guess just following on from that, how many of you have support as like a use case, if not the main one, part of a use case or certainly you're engaged with the support teams through your communities. So I think that's important as well, right? Is getting someone who's able to help answer if you haven't got the super users. Yeah, good too. I mean, that's definitely my background. I come from support, knowledge management. That's where it all kicks off, right? It's the easiest one, as Julian says, to justify an ROI because you can calculate the money saved from the support side. So that's usually the first in, and then you can expand through to the other programs like advocacy, customer success, ideation. It helps to set the foot in the support with the support use case and then expand beyond. It's definitely a good one to begin with.
Yeah, it's also one thing that many of my B2B customers are doing these days. They're using also the advocacy group on the community to share success stories, to also have it tied to like a tool for that, for example, like Bevy or something. You can tie these things also as well. You saw maybe my tab open from the Freshworks community. You can see there also some like partner programs and everything. Super excited stuff if you're more interested into that. And I think it's true, like for B2B specifically, these advocacy groups can also be the golden start for your community. If you already have internal groups or resources that you can rely on, absolutely do that and get them on the community, because you already know that they're quite passionate about the product and that they're well engaging.
No.
Great.
We're at 10-2 almost. If no one has any other questions, we can douse out the fire, finish up with a nice cold beer. Since I'm in Italy, so I guess we're in Europe, so our day is almost over.
Yes.
The rest of you, maybe a bit more to go. But I don't know. I'm heading out for dinner tonight. What can I say? Kids, friends.
Yes, same for me. And also, I just want to offer this to you, of course, if anybody wants to follow up, if anybody has any like other things that they worry about in the future, you can find me and you can find Alistair also on our Inspired community. Maybe I can just share the link here as well. So please register, ask questions. They are super happy to help. Always happy to hear from you. Feel free to just mention me. My name is Julian there. So hopefully easy to find. Cool.
Grand. Thank you, Julian, for all your insights. Thank you, Jay, Latifa, Ed, and everyone who asked questions. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. And may the summer begin. Let's kick off and get camping. All the best, everyone. Have a good afternoon. Good rest of your day.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.